Socrates had a really interesting take on the true definition of evilness, that it doesn't exist except for ignorance. The only good is knowledge, and the only evil is ignorance. Socrates. Socrates makes this claim in Plato's The Apology, where he also maintains the idea that no one willingly chooses to do wrong, and that doing wrong always harms the wrongdoer. Now, how can Socrates make a claim like this? I mean, even during his time, people committed some pretty seriously evil acts. It's an objective truth that committing murder, for example, is evil. I mean, these people seem to even take pleasure in this. They know what they're doing with complete, full knowledge, right? Well, by the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly why Socrates may be right, and how this kind of thinking may have led to his ultimate execution by the Athenians during that time. But first, before we examine these questions, we should look at the root definition of the word evil and where it really comes from to really understand what Socrates means by this. The earliest known use of the word evil is in the Old English period with the term uvel, which meant bad, vicious, ill, or wicked. This word traces back through the German übel, meaning transgressing, and the Dutch uvel. These words are derived from the Proto-Germanic ubeles, which itself comes from the Proto-Indo-European root upelo, from wap, meaning bad or evil. The primary sense of the Proto-Indo-European root seems to have referred to something that exceeded the proper boundaries or norms, with the word evil originally denoting something bad, defective, or unpleasant. In Old English and other early Germanic languages, evil was commonly used to describe disapproval, cruelty, harm, crime, and misfortune, as well as anything that stood in stark contrast to what was considered good. It signified the absence or the opposite of goodness. However, while these definitions capture how we commonly perceive evil, they don't really encompass its deeper meaning. The true essence of evil can be traced back to the Greek term diabolo, which combines dia, between, and balo, to throw or to place. As a whole, diabolo means to separate, to place a barrier, or to cause division. In essence, evil is that which creates separation, divides, or fractures, whether people, ideas, or even within ourselves. This interpretation really challenges us to reconsider the nature of evil, suggesting that it exists not only in what we consider bad, but also in the unseen divisions within what we call good. By focusing only on the obvious manifestations of evil, we may overlook the deeper, more subtle ways in which it operates. And it's this word, diabolo, that can be found a few different times in none other than the New Testament of the Bible. However, the use of this word is a lot more particular. The use of diabolo in the Bible specifically refers to slanderers or false accusers. To put together the understanding of the word diabolo and its use in the Bible, there seems to be a theme that the true original understanding of evil is division caused by harming another or through false judgment. Okay, so we have an understanding of the etymology of the word evil, but how does it tie in with Socrates? Socrates makes a seemingly very sweeping statement that evil is just plain ignorance. What's he even mean by this? Well, if we take that understanding of the nature of evil as division caused by false judgment, we get a better understanding of what Socrates means. Socrates believed that if people truly understood what was right, they would act accordingly. He also believed that people always choose what they perceive to be the best or most beneficial for themselves. So when someone chooses to do what we consider wrong, it means they have made a mistake and should be educated to see the wrongfulness. Essentially, they mistook evil for the good. So to distill it down, people tend to choose options that appear to be good for them. If they engage in what others consider evil, it's because they don't view it as evil. They will continue these behaviors as long as they continue to view them as justified or good. To use an example, in her book The Banality of Evil, German-American historian and philosopher Hannah Arendt reflects on her observations during the trial of Adolf Eichmann, a Nazi officer who played a prominent role in carrying out the final solution. Eichmann had been captured in Argentina and put on trial for the deaths of hundreds of thousands through his own authority. What the public expected was a trial of pure evil. Eichmann was placed behind a glass barrier not to shield him from the crowd, but to shield the crowd from him. However, what they found was something far more unsettling. A bureaucrat, an ordinary man driven by the pursuit of routine external goals, like securing his next promotion, earning positive performance reviews, gaining the acceptance of his peers, and avoiding rejection. His motivations were not those of a monster, but of someone who feared standing out, who feared being seen as an anomaly in the eyes of his social circle. This, Arendt argued, is the banality of evil. Every individual has their own perception of what constitutes good, and this very divergence in moral outlooks is the root of a lot of conflict, such as the ongoing war in Gaza, where opposing sides are driven by fundamentally different understandings of what is right, just, or virtuous. Okay, sure, but what about psychopaths, people born without empathy? There's definitely people who choose to do evil things because it specifically brings them pleasure, right? Perhaps they do, but do these actions truly demonstrate that psychopaths aren't ignorant?
Honestly, having a personality disorder is like kind of wearing like glasses, prescription glasses when you don't need them or something. It just kind of constantly distorts everything that you see around you, like funhouse mirrors. It distorts how you view yourself, and it distorts how you view other people. So you don't really have the right judgment or clear vision about yourself or what is good or normal, especially since you haven't been in touch with it maybe since you were like an infant, or have never, felt these types of emotions. You have no clue how to get in touch with them.
It's important to distinguish between happiness and simple pleasure. In his philosophy, Socrates defines happiness or flourishing as the proper functioning of an organism. One argument could be that psychopaths, due to their inherent psychological defects, may be ignorant of what constitutes true happiness and all that it involves. If someone lacking empathy chooses to cause harm, they would be choosing short-term pleasure over long-term happiness. They can't see how these harmful acts set off a butterfly effect of damage on both the individual harmed and the perpetrator. Okay, sure, but what about weakness of the will? Surely one might have a harmful ideology they truly believe to be good, but what about those who commit harmful acts out of weakness, though they may wish they could choose differently? This concept of the weakness of the will actually reinforces Socrates' argument. He argues that people in such situations don't truly act against their better judgment due to weakness of the will. Instead, they're acting in accordance with what they believe they want, but this is the result of poor judgment. For Socrates, doing wrong is not a matter of ill intent or malice, but again, rather a consequence of ignorance. As Socrates says in the Protagoras, no one knows or believes there is something else better than what he is doing, something possible. Will go on doing what he had been doing when he could be doing what is better. Drawing on Plato's allegory of the cave, it's almost like an optical illusion. Like the mirage of an iceberg that appears much further away than it really is, we tend to overvalue immediate pleasures and underestimate the distant and often far more severe consequences of our actions.
And then conceive someone saying to him that what he saw before was an illusion. But that now, when he's approaching nearer to reality and his eyes turn toward more real existence, he has a clearer vision.
Okay, sure, evilness is ignorance, but that would mean goodness is knowledge, right? According to Socrates, virtue is a form of knowledge. There are a few reasons he gives for this. First, all living beings strive for what they believe to be good. Second, if a person does not know what is truly good, they cannot do what is good, because they will always aim for a mistaken target. But if someone knows what is good, he will do what is good, because he will aim for what is good. This is very similar to the Gnostic teaching, which began in the latter part of the 1st century, that taught that knowledge leads to the path of salvation. During the time of Jesus, it was the Gnostics who believed that Jesus was not just a historical figure or divine savior in the traditional sense, but was seen as a revealer of hidden knowledge. This is central to the Gnostic teachings, the power of knowledge, stemming from the name Gnosis, which means knowledge or awareness. It was beliefs like these that led to the condemnation of Gnosticism as a heresy near the end of the 2nd to 4th century. However, prior to that, it was these ideas that had been swirling around early Christian circles. Modern scholars note that early Christianity was quite diverse. Many of the Gnostics during that time had actually contributed a great deal to the formation of the Proto-Orthodox Church before the establishment of the monarchic episcopate, the Creed, and the canon of holy books. But not all of these Gnostic teachings were lost. It's pretty interesting to note the take they had on the mythology of the Tree of Knowledge in the first book of the Bible, Genesis. Genesis describes a perfect God creating the world and humanity, placing Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. They are forbidden to eat from the tree of knowledge, but they disobey, which ultimately leads to suffering and sin. This is the modern Christian understanding of the book of Genesis, but the Gnostics had a pretty different take on it. In Gnosticism, the Garden of Eden represents spiritual ignorance. God, seen instead as a lower god, had trapped them there in ignorance to be dependent on him. The tree of knowledge in Gnostic tradition symbolizes the knowledge, or gnosis, that awakens the soul to its divine origin. Eating from the tree in the Garden of Eden is not seen as a sinful act, but as the acquisition of wisdom and self-awareness. The serpent introduced early on is also not seen as evil. It's viewed more as a guide, leading Adam and Eve to the fruit of the tree, which represents the awakening to the divine spark within them. The serpent offers wisdom, not evil, and its role is to help humanity break free from the ignorance imposed by the lower creator god. These parallels between Gnosticism and Socrates' own beliefs and teachings on good and evil are no coincidence. It's been believed that Gnosticism drew a lot from Platonism during the time. Combining both the esoteric teachings of the Gnostics and the proclamation by Socrates that knowledge is a virtue, we start to see a picture. But how do we attain this knowledge? It's important to note that the knowledge that Socrates talks about isn't just like reading a book or having someone teach you how to do something. It's knowledge on a much deeper level. Socrates believed that true knowledge was intertwined with wisdom. In Plato's Apology, Socrates reflects on a conversation he had with someone and concludes, "I am wiser than this man because neither of us seems to know anything of real importance. However, while he believes he knows something, he actually knows nothing. As for me, I don't pretend to know what I don't know. And in this small matter, I seem to be wiser than him." This knowledge that Socrates talks about could be broadly understood as insight and experience. To know that you don't know everything means that many times you have experienced the sudden awareness that you were, in fact, wrong, and that there's still so much to learn despite feeling like we have it all figured out. Surely, as we experience the joys and moments of deep sadness in our lives, we attain more wisdom, insight, and empathy. We begin to understand how it's all woven together. For instance, a child might gaze up at their parents, innocent and curious, asking, "Why would someone fall to a life of drugs? Haven't they learned better?" Yet when life's weight grows heavy and the world around them seems to bend in dark, unyielding ways, that once naive child may find themselves in the very soil where a terrible addiction takes root. And after much toil in this blanket of earth, they may eventually break free from this addiction and look upon those still trapped in the mud, offering not judgment but a quiet accepting pity. For they walk the same path. They have wisdom born of struggle, empathy nurtured by pain. There is no secret way to attain the virtue of knowledge, as Socrates talks about, other than through mainly just living life. Perhaps by becoming more aware of our behaviors and ways of being, the whys and the hows of our actions. Of course, nothing can be changed or truly understood unless we bring our attention to it. A mind lost to the clatter of the world, banging around noisily, is a mind unexamined. Indeed, during Socrates' own trial, after he chose death over exile, he uttered these very words: "The unexamined life is not worth living." During that moment, he had faced a very difficult decision: face death or compromise his principles. And that leads me back to what I said at the beginning of this video. Ultimately, it was teachings like these that led to Socrates' own death. While his ethical theory that evilness is just ignorance wasn't directly correlated to his execution, I think it serves to bring the point home. During that time, Socrates was pretty much hated in Athens. This was largely because he often exposed the ignorance and arrogance of prominent people, making them appear pretty foolish. He He was also a vocal critic of Athenian democracy, a system the Athenians held pretty dear. And it was because of these things that Socrates was charged with impiety and corrupting the youth. While Socrates may have been guilty of the charges brought against him, these accusations really stemmed from his rejection of the city's traditional gods and his influence over young people, which sometimes led them to question authority. Today we will look at the Athenians with complete confusion. Executing a man because of these small charges? Had they known the impact he would have on the world, the good he would bring to philosophy and education, would they have executed him? It's hard to say. But many today would call what the Athenians did as perhaps evil, or even perhaps ignorant.